The day I went on my business trip, my husband of 3 months was having fun with my best friend of 10 years in our new home. I watched the surveillance coldly from a hotel room not far from home. I listened as they cuddled afterward, discussing how to ask me for a divorce. I took a deep breath. Finally, my plan could move to the next phase. It had rained all night, only stopping this morning. The sky was still gloomy, and there was that distinctive earthy smell outside. I sat at the dining table, peeling eggs for Mike. "Good morning, honey." A warm chest pressed against my back, damp from just getting out of bed. "Morning," I replied weakly. I turned my face slightly, and he planted a heavy kiss on my cheek. Mike lazily sat across from me, picked up an egg, and furrowed his brows impatiently. "Did you have a headache again all night? Every time it rains, you get a headache. I keep telling you to go to the hospital, but you never do." Mike is a doctor. To him, if you're sick, you go to the hospital. I have a problem where my head aches whenever it rains, and he's always urging me to see a doctor, but I've never gone. He thinks I'm avoiding medical treatment. But I just don't like it. Since a car accident in my senior year of high school, I've lost a part of my memory and am left with this rainy day headache. I don't remember what happened back then. I just know while I was unconscious, my grandmother arranged for my transfer to another school. I handed him the egg. "I'm leaving after breakfast. It's a 5-day trip." "You're going on a trip again?" He cuddled up to me like a big puppy. "If I had known, I wouldn't have let you off last night." I subtly disentangled from his embrace, feeling a bit nauseated. All right, it's just 5 days. I'll go pack." Hearing no response from him, I turned around. Sure enough, he was engrossed in chatting on his phone. I bet he was inviting Angela, my best friend. As expected, half an hour after I walked out the door with my suitcase, Angela arrived at our home. She wore a sexy red dress, her thick, seaweed-like hair cascading over her shoulders. Her glamorous face with exquisite makeup could make any man lose control. I watched as Mike pulled her inside, and they couldn't wait to kiss passionately right in the hallway. I quickly turned down the volume as the seductive sounds came from the surveillance footage. They had a wild time, from the living room sofa to the bed in the master bedroom, trying various positions all day long under the gaze of our wedding photo. I remembered the first time I brought Angela over. She was interested in our bed and specifically asked Mike for his contact details, saying she wanted to know where to buy such a comfortable bed. She probably had her eyes on Mike from then. She got what she wanted, able to go wild on that bed. Watching Mike's face on the screen, I felt momentarily dazed. Mike was a fellow medical student, tall and handsome, with striking features. He supposedly fell in love with me at first sight and pursued me relentlessly, picking me up and dropping me off, giving me flowers and gifts, even staying with me for boring lab experiments. I have some self-awareness. I'm not a great beauty, just pretty in a simple, delicate way, with average grades. Nothing really stood out. I thought he was just interested for a bit, but he persisted for 2 years. On graduation day, I envied everyone with their parents there for the ceremony. My parents died when I was young, and my grandmother, with whom I survived, passed away a few years ago. I stared at the seat reserved for my family, thinking if Grandma were alive, she would be so proud. "Wendy, congratulations." I looked up and saw Mike, dressed in a suit, holding a bouquet of vibrant flowers and gazing at me intently. At that moment, my heart seemed to burst with emotion. "Mike, can I trust you? If I hand my heart to you, will you protect it?" He nodded firmly and opened his arms. That day, we became a couple. After graduating, I joined Mike's hospital laboratory team, settling into a stable relationship. 2 years later, we married, becoming a little family. I thought we would grow old together like any couple in love. Until a month after our wedding, he took me to meet his parents. That's when I learned he was the sole heir to Booth's Group, the top company in the city. I couldn't even guess his net worth. His parents warmly welcomed me. His mother held my hand, complaining, "This kid should have brought you home sooner. Why hide such a beautiful girlfriend?" I glanced sheepishly at Mike. He smiled and held my hand. "Mom, I was afraid she'd run away." We're officially married, so I dared to bring Wendy here. Mike. Suddenly, a noise came from upstairs, followed by hurried footsteps. Mike stiffened, subtly letting go of my hand. That's Mike's sister. She was resting upstairs. Must have just woken up, his mother explained, her face a bit awkward. A frail, teenage girl came downstairs, her face pale, eyes watery, and looking very fragile. Like a delicate flower, she wore a cotton dress similar to mine, making my heart skip a beat. Is this Mike's sister? I quickly stood to greet her. Hello. The girl ignored me, walking straight to Mike. Mike, did you get married? Mike visibly panicked, quickly holding her hand. Nancy, don't be mad. I'll explain everything, don't worry. He led her gently to the sofa, treating her like a precious pearl. I stood awkwardly in the living room as Mike gently explained things to his sister. His mother pulled me aside and whispered, Wendy, Mike and Nancy are very close. Her health has been poor, so we rarely let her out. She's been incredibly attached to Mike since childhood. I nodded and turned my head to see my sister curled up in Mike's arms, crying. He gently stroked her hair, his eyes filled with pain and affection. I was confused. Was it really that hard for Mike to accept getting married? That day, Mike's sister didn't say a word to me. She looked at me with hatred and despair, definitely not how a sister should look at someone. Did Nancy always have health issues? I asked Mike on the way home. He was silent for a moment. It's a heart condition. She's never found a suitable donor. She used to be so cheerful and lively. Since she got sick, she's become very sensitive. Wendy, he said, holding my face and looking into my eyes, Nancy is a kind girl. She really likes you, she just can't express it well. You will like her. I nodded, pushing down the discomfort I felt inside. At that time, I was purely in love with Mike. I even teased him lightly about having a slight sister complex. Later, I discovered that Nancy wasn't his biological sister but an adopted child. It was late. In the surveillance footage, the two were huddled together, sleeping. Now it was my turn to make a move. I couldn't cry instantly, so I sprayed a bit of pepper spray on myself. The intense sting made tears stream down, smearing my eye makeup, leaving my eyes swollen and red. Dragging my suitcase, I took a cab back to our bedroom door, messed up my hair, and took a deep breath. The show was about to begin. I pushed open the door and turned on the light. The two on the bed woke up instantly, sitting up, the blanket slipping off their bodies. I screamed, grabbed the bedside lamp, and started hitting them both. My sudden attack seemed to have caught them off guard. After several hits, Angela finally reacted, screaming and hiding under the blanket. Mike's expression turned from confusion to panic. After taking a few more hits, he jumped off the bed and held me tight. Wendy, calm down. Let me explain. Mike, you bastard. I struggled, taking the chance to scratch his face a few times. Wendy. Mike forcibly dragged me to the living room and sat me down on the couch. He was still pretending to be affectionate, probably afraid I'd hurt them too much. I took several deep breaths, slowly rotating my overstrained wrist. Gradually calming down, I looked at Mike with red eyes, his head lowered, holding me tight. Mike, did you forget about the surveillance cameras we installed when we renovated the house? I asked in a tearful whisper. His eyes turned cold. I sighed lightly and pushed away his arms. Funny, I used to love when he held me like this. I didn't expect we'd break up while he held me in the same way. I got up, dragged my suitcase to the door, and said, divorce papers, 9 a.m. tomorrow. There was no sound behind me. I knew he'd agree. Only by getting divorced could they fall into a place beyond redemption. The wheels of fate began to turn slowly. I was excitedly awaiting what was about to happen. The next day, at 9 a.m., Angela walked toward me, clutching Mike's arm, a face full of guilt. Wendy, I'm sorry. Mike and I just couldn't help it. I knew her too well. The smugness in her eyes was barely contained while she tried to act kind. I shot her a cold glance. Don't laugh out loud, Angela. This is your own choice. I threw the divorce papers at their faces and walked inside quickly. The divorce went smoothly. Mike remained expressionless the entire time. Yes, Mike never loved me. I should have known from the first time I saw Nancy. Maybe that visit triggered Nancy. She was admitted to our hospital the very next day. It was raining that day, and I stayed home because of a severe headache. Thinking about Nancy being hospitalized, I decided to cook and bring her some comfort food. Approaching the room, I heard soft sobbing. Mike, will I never get better? The doctors said without a heart, I can only live until I'm 20. Mike, I don't want to die. I don't want to let you go to Wendy when you obviously love me. I froze, pulling back my hand from the door. My heart pounded. What did she mean? How could Mike love Nancy? They were siblings. Nancy, I will get you treated, Mike's voice echoed Mike. Nancy cried out, is it so hard to admit you love me? Look at Wendy and then look at me. Look at our faces, our clothes. Why can't you see it clearly? I knew how much I resembled Nancy from the first moment we met. If you didn't love me, why didn't you bring Wendy home before we got married? If you didn't love me, why did you avoid me? If you didn't love me, why did you kiss me on the lips while I was asleep last night? We're not real siblings. You can love me. Suddenly, my mind went blank. Did Mike love Nancy? I walked to the door and saw through the glass that Mike was holding Nancy, gently kissing the top of her head. Mike, I know I don't have long to live. Wendy can stay with you. I'm too selfish. I just wanted to know that you love me too. Just love, that's enough. Nancy, Mike's voice was filled with sorrow, you've always been the one I love. I'm just too scared of losing you. Wendy is nothing but a solace. It wasn't a slight sister complex. Mike always loved his sister Nancy. I was just a comfort. My head throbbed violently. Crouching down, I held my head as the pain grew more intense, as if something was about to burst out. I couldn't help but groan, but my remaining sanity told me I had to leave. Leave this place immediately. Don't see the two inside. Don't let them see me like this. Stumbling, I rushed downstairs. What was that flashing in my mind? Snow-white photos flying everywhere, malicious gazes, lots of people around, whispering, pointing. What on earth is going on? Falling several times along the way, getting up several times, my knees scraped, my arms scratched, but none of that pain compares to the headache. It hurts so much I'm drenched in sweat. Finally back home, with nearly depleted strength, I stumbled to the bed, grabbed the painkillers from the nightstand, and popped them in my mouth. No water. Not sure if the bitter taste in my throat distracted me from the headache or if the painkillers kicked in. My mind gradually clears. The worse the headache, the clearer my mind once it recedes. I lie on the bed, battered and bruised, my sweat-soaked hair clinging to my face. How painful is it to let go of someone you love? It can't be worse than the splitting headache I just had. I only feel cold inside. Turns out, every moment I thought was love, Mike was seeing Nancy. Hugging Nancy's stand-in, kissing Nancy's stand-in. Nancy was always standing behind me. Mike, I don't want any part of this anymore. And what were those images in my mind earlier? The headache is getting worse, and more images are flooding in. Is my lost memory coming back? I drift into a fitful sleep until a phone call wakes me. It's the call that changes everything. Hello, is this Wendy? A strange man's hoarse voice. I'm Amy's brother, can we meet? Amy? A delicate figure flashes in my mind. I remember her. She was our middle school classmate, so gentle, always treating me and Angela like little sisters even though we were the same age. But she suddenly dropped out in our second year, and I think something happened to me around that time too. We lost contact afterwards. Alright, I'm free tonight. I don't know why he's looking for me, but if I can reconnect with Amy, that's good. When I arrive at the meeting place that evening, Amy's brother is already there. He looks to be about our age, standing tall in casual attire that can't hide his commanding presence. He's bowing his head, looking a bit somber. "Hello, I'm Wendy." I walk up and greet him. He stands slightly. "I'm Amy's brother. Sorry to disturb you, it took me a lot to find your contact." No need to be formal, Amy always looked after us. "How is she?" I can't shake a sense of foreboding. Amy's brother pauses, taking a soft breath. "Amy passed away last month." My brain feels like it's been struck, going blank. Amy's gone? She's my age. She left something for you before she passed. He produces a thick, old black book, like a diary, with a letter on top of it. I raise my head in confusion, looking at him. Why did someone who disappeared for so many years leave me this? Amy's brother clenches his fists, looking solemnly at me. I haven't opened the letter, but I read Amy's diary. His eyes redden suddenly, choking up. I never expected this from Amy. "Wendy, I think I need to be with you while you go through this to ensure your safety." Ensure my safety? What could possibly harm me? Unless it has to do with my lost memory. Trembling, I open the letter. Just a few short words inside. "Dear Wendy, I've finally killed him, that man who trapped me for so long. For years, I've been in the abyss, and now I've dragged him down to hell with me. I thought I was the only victim, but when I saw those photos I realized you were too. Wendy, my heart is finally free, and now I'm leaving too. The bad man is gone. You should walk out and embrace the sunlight." That man? A giant darkness crashes over me, accompanied by howling wind and rain, sickening panting, and the face of a demon. Pain, all over, head splitting. "Wendy, Wendy." A distant call pierces the darkness, bringing my consciousness back. Terrified, I stare at the man in front of me. I've remembered everything. Senior year in high school, our teacher paired us up for subjects we were weak in. I, struggling in math, was lucky to be paired with the math whiz, Eric. Eric was a star in our school, sunny, handsome, always acing math, the crush of many girls, myself included. But I never expected Eric to like someone like me, a nobody. Since being in the same group, he often brought me breakfast, always sat next to me while explaining problems, and every time he looked at me, his eyes sparkled. I remember he invited me to meet in a grove after final exams. "Wendy, I like you. Let's work hard and get into the same college. I will take care of you and your grandma in the future." His eyes' dazzling starlight almost blinded me, and I nodded eagerly. During the winter break, Eric and I planned to study at the city library. Angela wasn't in the same high school as us, always attending expensive private schools. I introduced Angela to Eric. "Eric, this is my best friend, Angela. Let her study with us." Sweet, intimate duo became a trio. On the left was my friendship, on the right my love, and I was incredibly motivated to study. Of course, I didn't notice Angela's suddenly brightened eyes that day or how she dressed prettier each day, nor the jealousy on her face whenever I was close to Eric. I wouldn't have known she liked Eric too if I hadn't accidentally put their exchanged notes in my bag. Simple invitations and rejections. "Eric, let's go skiing this weekend." "No." "Eric, can we meet tonight? I have something for you." "No." "Eric, I like you." No reply to the last one. I remembered that after classes ended today, Eric was quiet the whole way while walking me home. I teased him for a while, and he finally sighed, pulling me into a hug. "Do you know your boyfriend is being eyed by someone else? Could you be more careful from now on?" His sudden hug caught me off guard. Although we had been dating, we always behaved properly and just studied together. It was our first hug. Smelling the fragrance on him made my head spin, and my face turned beet red. I didn't even pay much attention to what he was saying. It wasn't until I saw the note that I understood. I took a deep breath. But it's okay, school is starting soon, and once we're in different schools, Angela will forget about Eric. The next day, I turned down Angela's invitation to study together. I thought everything would get back to normal. But I didn't expect that on the first day of school, I would be dragged into a nightmare. That day during a break, I finished solving a very difficult math problem and noticed there were hardly any people in the classroom. I looked out the window and saw many people gathered on the playground. There were white paper-like things scattered on the ground, resembling photos. Were people handing out flyers at the school playground? When a few classmates returned to the class, holding photos and pointing at me, they said, "It's Wendy, right? This face looks just like hers." I didn't expect her to look so pure but still do something like this. You know, she doesn't have parents, only a grandma. No wonder she did such a thing. What kind of thing? I snatched one of the photos from the nearest classmate. In the photo, there was a naked girl with closed eyes and a greasy man. I stared at the photo, trembling all over. Even with closed eyes, I could tell the face was mine from my teenage years, especially since it had Wendy, Class 3, Grade 12 written beside it. When were these photos taken? The man's face was pixelated, so I couldn't recognize him. This is fake. I never did anything like this. Who pasted my face onto this photo? It's fake, really, I didn't do this. I tried explaining to my classmates, would remember if I did something like that. Please believe me. All my classmates looked at me with disdain as if they were watching a fool's futile struggle. I really didn't do it. I pointed desperately at the face in the photo and said, "Look, the face in the photo is just 11 or 12 years old." Me? Suddenly, I noticed a mole on the girl's chest in the photo. I also have a mole on my chest. My mind went blank, and fragments of memories came rushing back. Angela, why do I always fall asleep when studying at your house? I complained to Angela at 12 years old, every time I wake up, my body feels sticky and sore. Wendy, are you not sleeping well lately? You were having nightmares just now, and I couldn't wake you up, said Angela. No, it's only like this when I'm at your place, I mumbled. It couldn't be what I was thinking. I tried to focus my scattered thoughts and searched carefully for clues in the photo. The small trinket hanging by the bedside caught my eye. It was an ugly doll, a gift I gave to Angela when we first met. Yes, this room was Angela's. The pixelated face was Angela's dad. That fatherly figure who always called me Wendy from afar and stuffed my bag with snacks whenever I visited Angela. Stripped off his false kindness, revealing his true monstrous nature. When did I fall into such a trap without realizing it? I felt cold all over, sweat and tears streaming down my cheeks. It was the milk. Every time I went to Angela's house, the milk her dad prepared contained sedatives. Once I fell into a deep sleep, he did whatever he wanted. I couldn't stop myself from retching. It was disgusting. He did such vile things to me, and I was completely unaware. If it weren't for these photos. The photos, right, the photos scattered all over the playground. How many people had seen them? No, I had to pick them up. Ignoring the pointing stares around me, I dashed towards the playground. Someone grabbed my hand with such force that I couldn't break free. Wendy, calm down, Wendy. The person in front of me seemed half hidden in the mist. I couldn't see his face clearly, and the loud buzzing in my ears drowned out his voice. It wasn't until I buried my face in a familiar, fragrant embrace that I woke up in despair. Eric. He must have seen those photos. What good would it do to pick them up now? Everyone has seen them, they won't forget. Even if it was proven that I was drugged and assaulted, they would only say, Wendy was raped, turning it into gossip. Wendy, I believe you. We'll call the police. Eric held me tightly, his voice trembling with a slight sob. I didn't dare hug him back. He was so clean, and I already felt filthy. Eric, remember, the Wendy you like is clean. After saying that, I pushed him away calmly. Wendy, Eric called out, his face filled with pain as he held my hand. I'm fine, Eric. I just miss my parents a bit. Help me get a leave from the teacher. I'm going home, I said, letting go of his hand and turning my back to him. I didn't want him to see my embarrassment. Let him remember me with a smiling face. The photos scattered all over the ground, let them stay there. Someone will pick them up and destroy them, I don't care anymore. I walked out of the school gate in a daze. Seeing the endless stream of vehicles, I stepped forward without hesitation. I thought I had died, but it turned out I had lost a year of memories. I forgot Eric and that desperate day. I returned to my old self, worked hard in my new high school, and finally got into the university I hoped for. I never saw Eric again. A long time later, I found out that after my incident, the person who spread the photos was caught, and Eric hit him on the head with a brick. Later, his family arranged for him to drop out of school and send him abroad. I knew nothing of this. I was thoroughly enjoying my college life, acting like nothing had ever happened. But every time it rained, I'd get a headache, and fuzzy images would come to my mind. At first, my grandma would take me to see a doctor. I found it useless and firmly refused to go to the hospital, only taking painkillers when it got really bad. The memories would come rushing in, bringing all the dirt and unbearable truths back to light. Wendy, who had recklessly rushed into the sea of cars in utter despair, had washed off her filth. Amy's letter in my hand was stained with tears. I hadn't expected that while I was being kept in the dark, someone else was also drowning in despair, unable to escape. From Amy's brother, I learned that she had attempted suicide countless times over the years, but could never find peace. Until this time, she stormed into that disgusting man's office, said nothing, stabbed him a dozen times, each one a fatal blow, and then jumped out the window. Such a kind person. She didn't know I had lost my memory and thought I was also stuck in a nightmare. Before dying, she left a note telling me she had slain the demon. But there wasn't just one demon. The photos were taken by Angela, and she had spread them across the playground. Wendy's name was all over them, clearly aiming at me. This was the one who actively invited me over to do homework, who lied about being allergic to milk, who confessed to Eric and got harshly rejected. My dear friend Angela. No wonder I couldn't reach her after transferring schools. It was all because of this. Wendy, that man is dead, and you have a bright future ahead of you, Amy's brother said, with a hint of worry in his eyes. Future? That word suddenly felt so distant. My husband, Mike, loved his sister Nancy, who had heart disease. Even though Nancy didn't have much time left, even after she died, Mike would always hold her in his heart. I refused to be anyone's second choice. Angela was probably living happily somewhere, but I didn't want her to get away with what she had done. Suddenly, an idea came to my mind, a secret plan. I had introduced Angela to Mike. I went to great lengths to find Angela and pretended to bump into her. We talked about how we were doing, and when she heard I was married to Mike, she couldn't hide her excitement. She immediately arranged to visit our new home that weekend. When she saw Mike, I didn't miss the sparkle in her eyes. This is my best friend, Angela, I introduced her. Nice to meet you. Mike wasn't in high spirits. His smile seemed forced. Only Nancy could affect his mood like that. It looked like Nancy wasn't doing well. I held his arm and playfully said, Angela was a treasure in our class, shake hands with her. What treasure? Mike asked with a loving smile. Because she's Rh negative, I said. Angela's blood is rare, is that so? Mike glanced at Angela thoughtfully before extending his hand. Well, Angela, come over and play more often. Keep Wendy company. Angela's face lit up with a smile. I let go of Mike's arm and coldly watched the two of them. I gave them the choice, hoping they'd restrain their desires, but if not? Of course, they didn't let me down. In less than a week, they were sneaking around right under my nose. Within a month, they were fooling around in my bed. I remained calm and minimized my presence in front of Mike. After all, he was busy dealing with two women now and had little time left. Mike transferred most of his assets to me, which I hadn't expected. Though he cheated first and deceived my feelings first, I didn't hold a grudge over the assets, considering how he fit into my plan as a pawn. Still, it wasn't my style to turn down money offered to me. I accepted it all. Angela took Mike's divorce certificate and walked over to me, saying, Wendy, this divorce was worth it, huh? So much money, you couldn't spend it all in a lifetime, not even married yet, and thinking about the money, she had such a sour tone. I tossed the divorce certificate into my bag and said solemnly, yeah, considering I was his first wife, the treatment is different. You better look after your future husband. When you divorce, you might not get as much. Mike loves me too much. We won't ever get divorced, Angela said confidently. Is that so? I looked at her playfully. Mike walked over, looked at me briefly, then turned to Angela. Weren't we going to register our marriage? He said, turning away. Angela gave me a triumphant look, as if to say, see, your man is mine now. She quickly walked after Mike. I watched their backs as she caught up and held his hand. Mike said something, and Angela smiled at him. Angela, I couldn't help but call out. Their intertwined figures turned around, and I suddenly didn't want her to be so happy. I remembered those photos a long time ago, I said softly. I knew she heard me. I could see her face go pale even from that distance. I turned around and walked away. As for Mike, I didn't even glance at him. Angela dared to interfere in my marriage so blatantly only because I had lost my memory after the car accident. After we got in touch this time, she tested me several times, until she was sure I had completely forgotten, then she relaxed and approached me. Now, I told her, I already remembered everything. Angela, congrats on stepping into the gates of hell. Even though Mike and I work in the same hospital, one in cardiology and one in the lab, it would be hard to meet without arranging it. Not to mention, after the divorce, we both avoided each other. I saw them again outside Nancy's hospital room. I was upstairs getting some test materials for an inpatient. When I passed by the room, I saw Angela squatting at the door, silently crying against the wall. I slowed my steps and looked into the room. Mike was comforting Nancy gently. When she saw me, Angela quickly wiped her tears and stood up. What are you doing here? Came to laugh at me? I rolled my eyes, really speechless, and turned to leave, not bothering to deal with her. Stop, Angela stepped forward and grabbed my wrist. Wendy, you did this on purpose. You knew about Mike and Nancy all along. You used it to get me to divorce Mike. I turned back, looking surprised, never thought the last place in every exam Angela could figure this out. I shook off her hand. Yes, I did it on purpose. But did I force you onto his bed? A flash of embarrassment crossed her face, but it vanished quickly. She took a step closer and whispered in my ear, so what if you used me? I'm still Mike's wife, aren't I? And you don't know, do you? Nancy is about to die. The doctors say she has less than 2 months. Once she's gone, Mike will only love me. Hearing the smugness in her voice, I didn't argue. I just quietly watched her arrogant face and asked, I heard your dad was murdered? Her smile froze, her expression twisted a bit. Angela, when you do bad things, you have to pay. How do you know you won't die before Nancy? She looked at me and took a step back, flashing a sinister smile. Wendy, remember those photos? There are many, yours, others, a lot. My chest tightened. I couldn't believe she could be so calm after doing such things. Didn't she feel any guilt? Don't look at me like that. You all brought it on yourselves. You loved coming to my house back then. Angela's face showed a brief emptiness and confusion. I only brought you home because that way Daddy would come home, have dinner with me, and buy me my favorite dolls. You wouldn't understand. Looking at the craziness in her eyes, I didn't know what to say, so I turned to leave. Yes, I didn't understand. I didn't understand why someone could hurt others so ruthlessly and still think they did nothing wrong. No, wait. She suddenly realized, following me, if you remembered, you should hate me. Why use me? Why let me marry Mike? You must have a plan, right? Guess. I quickened my pace. My plan was simple, but I doubted Angela would figure it out before she died. A month later, gossip spread in the hospital about Mike's new wife. They had just been married a month when she accidentally fell down the stairs one night, suffered a severe brain injury, stayed in intensive care for a few days, and was eventually declared brain dead. They said that afternoon, Mike, as the family member, signed the heart donation agreement, donating Angela's heart to Nancy, who had the same blood type. They said Mike was so distraught over his wife that his hands trembled too much to sign, and he fainted out of grief right after signing. The night before the surgery, I went to see Angela. We had known each other for over 10 years, but it was the first time I saw her lying so quietly even with the breathing tube. Her beauty was undiminished. I remembered being bullied by classmates for not having parents since I lived with my grandma, and Angela holding my hand. "I don't have a mom either, let's play together." From kindergarten, we went to school together, shared toys, and did homework together. She gave me years of companionship, along with the deepest hurt. I sat by her bed. "Angela, do you remember when you invited me to your house? You stopped downstairs and hesitated, asking if we could skip it. I asked why, and you stammered before taking me in. That was the first time, right? You hesitated then, didn't you? So, because of that moment of kindness, I gave you a chance. When I contacted you again, I introduced you to Mike on purpose. I thought if you cared about my feelings even a little, as long as you kept your distance from Mike because he was my husband, you wouldn't get hurt, but you chose this path. I could only watch you walk it. Angela, I came to tell you, even if you die, I won't forgive you." When I walked out, I ran into Mike rushing in. He looked exhausted and worn out, but nothing could hide the joy in his eyes. Seeing me, he paused. "Wendy, what are you doing here?" "Came to see Angela." "Congrats, Mike, dreams really do come true." While everyone was consoling him on his loss, I congratulated him on achieving his goal. His face showed a hint of panic. "Wendy, what do you mean?" I patted his shoulder. "Congrats, Mike, you finally get to save the woman you love." "What do you know?" He grabbed my shoulder tightly, his eyes bloodshot as he stared at me. I calmly pulled down his hand. "I know it's always been Nancy you love. Should I know anything else?" He gave me a deep look, seemed to believe I knew nothing more, and then lowered his head. "Wendy, I'm sorry for all these years I didn't care and couldn't be bothered to listen. I'm leaving for abroad tomorrow." After the divorce, I resigned and applied to a university overseas for further studies. The past few days, I've been handing over my work and handling my domestic properties. I believe I won't be back in the country for a few years. Returning home, I packed my luggage. Then I took out my phone, opened the surveillance app, and replayed the footage from the day Angela had her accident. At 3:15 a.m. Angela appeared at the stairs, looking dazed as if about to go downstairs. At that moment, Mike came up behind her and without hesitation pushed her down. Mike then walked down, checked her breathing, and took the cushion from the couch, pressing it tightly over her nose and mouth. After a while, he removed the cushion, called for an ambulance, and pretended to be performing CPR. I watched calmly and captured the video, sending it to a new phone. I had told Mike long ago that we had installed surveillance cameras at home. He must have forgotten about them. I put the new phone into a packaging box. On my way to the airport tomorrow, I will mail this box to the police. As for what will happen to Mike, let the law decide. As for me, I'm heading toward a better future. Shortly after the divorce, I received a beautiful postcard. It was from the country I'm about to arrive in, signed elegantly by Eric.